and Mara Murray. And we're asking the question, do you think they left voluntarily? And honestly, I think that has to be part of the calculus. Did they leave voluntarily or were they taken? Did they have plans to potentially come back? Or was it a scenario where they literally were taken by someone who harmed them ultimately? Because Brianna, well, actually Maura actually disappeared in 2003, and Brianna disappeared shortly thereafter. So we are talking about 23 years that they have been gone. And ultimately, I don't think that the odds are good that they will be found. I mean, 23 years is a very long time. It makes me really sad for their relatives. And it makes me really sad that it's been this long, because I can't imagine how their relatives must feel. And it's extremely sad to have this unresolved, because as humans, we like patterns. We like to have things tied up in a neat bow because that's what humans do. They like resolution. They like answers. They like to understand why things happened. And I once was a victim of a crime, and I remember talking to, welcome, I remember talking to one of my very close friends, and I said, why do you think this happened? And she's like, well, sometimes there is no why. People are just crappy people. That's just what it is. There are people who are predators. There are people who are negative and want to harm other people just because there's something that's just not right about them, And it's extremely sad that these two girls potentially ran into somebody like that. So I want your honest opinion. Do you think some disappearances are intentional, or does something always go wrong? Let's talk about laying out the possibility. There's a difference between planning and reaction. The thing is, with Maura had actually packed up her dorm room. Maura had had a lot of stress leading up to her disappearance. For instance, she had had a credit misuse issue, and had been potentially facing a honor code hearing to determine whether or not she would stay at West Point, because she was attending West Point. She'd also known that her sister, she was upset about her sister because her sister had had some sort of maybe addiction issue or something like that. Welcome, Jessica. Welcome back, Jessica Cabe. And she had had some sort of addiction issue. So she was very upset and said, my sister. Welcome, guys. It's really hard to see this sometimes. Welcome, Noob Slayer. So what we're asking is, do you think that Brianna Maitland and Maura Murray left voluntarily? And I am open to an honest opinion for sure, because I think that it's really important to just kind of discuss that. And so, because do you think that some disappearances are initially intentional and then does something go wrong? So Maura actually, I think, was planning to go away. I don't think she was planning to go away for a long period of time, given the fact that she did pack up her dorm room. She likely, and the thing is, was she running away from something or running towards something? Because I think with Maura, she actually had decided to get away for a bit, maybe potentially wanting to actually get away from the honor code violation that she was potentially looking at, which could have caused her to potentially lose her spot at West Point. Apparently, she was extremely intelligent. She was also, welcome. She was also very intelligent and athletic and could have done a lot of things, but she was having struggles. Or was it a reaction to some of the things that she was dealing with her family? For instance, I believe she had wrecked her dad's car at one point, and that night that she disappeared, she actually, I believe, wrecked her car again. She had went to the liquor store and gotten some wine, they think. And so also she had withdrew some money, like she was wanting to go away somewhere for a little bit, not necessarily go away permanently, right? And so we have to think too about her emotional state. If she is carrying all of that on her shoulders, her sister, and then she emails professors and talks about a death in the family and having to be away for a while, then clearly there was some sense of planning, but it likely doesn't seem like it was a permanent sense of I'm never coming back here, right? And then the other thing we got to think about is sometimes when people get overly upset and get overly worked up, they're not really thinking. So was it a scenario where maybe she was a little bit intoxicated? And the thing is, was she running because she had been intoxicated and was worried about an OWI? Or was it a scenario where she was just in such a state of dysregulation that she didn't really have the moment to be able to calm down, right? To be able, okay, Prana, to be able to essentially realize what she was doing and was kind of reacting in a fight or flight system or a state of dysregulation. Because ultimately you think about when a lot of things, and I've been there, and I know a lot of us have too, is when you're in a scenario where you're just so namaste, when you're in such an experience where you're in such a tizzy that you just cannot see your left from your right, and you're just so like overwhelmed and confused and don't know where to turn next. It's like, what do you do? How do you get past this? How do you regulate yourself when you're in the middle of somewhere you likely don't know? You've wrecked your car. You know that there's going to be consequences. You're dealing with all of these things that you've got going on. And there you are, right? It's like, what do you do? How do you do it? And then the thing is, there's a difference between leaving and vanishing. Leaving, of course, is your own free will. You decide, you know what? I want to get out of this. I want to be done, all of that. Or you vanish. And from what it appears, there are so many things that don't make sense. It seemed like she prepared at some point, but I don't think that she prepared to go forever. She was close with her family. She was close with her sister. And so if someone planned to leave, why so many cases fall apart so quickly? So with her, there's no follow-up activity. There's no follow-up activity on her credit cards. There's no follow-up activity with her family who she was close to, and all sorts of things. So that doesn't lend credence to the fact that she left voluntarily. The other thing that's really interesting is there's a lot of issues, I think, with the car. I think the car is a big piece of it because both her and, well, we'll go to Brianna next, but Mara left her car. She's in rural New Hampshire, snow's on the ground, it's freezing. She leaves her car. There's a bus driver who wants to help her. She says, no, I've already placed a call to roadside assistance. However, there was no cell service. They were that rural. So if you think about that added detail makes you wonder, was she afraid that she was potentially going to get, a criminal charge for maybe drinking? Was she having the break where she didn't want to have to upset her father again by being like, hey, I wrecked my car again? What other things were going through her mind? Am I going to have to tell my family that I'm probably getting kicked out of West Point? I mean, any number of things that you can think about. But the thing that's interesting is she abandoned her car in that cold conditions. And the other thing is there was found a rag in her tailpipe. Now, likely that is not something that Brianna herself would have done. That could have been someone who was trying to have an opportunity to potentially perpetrate on someone, is what it sounds like, right? It's in the middle of the night. It's late. She's not really going to see that, so you think about how that goes. And and then the other thing too, is there are no footprints in the snow showing where she went, what direction she went in. It's like there's a very short period of time in which she just disappeared. And no one knows where she went. No one saw her. No one has seen her since 2003. And then a few weeks later, Brianna Maitland disappeared. Brianna Maitland was a person who had been estranged from her family. She had been assaulted by one of her friends previously, like just before she disappeared. She left her shift at work. She was staying at friends' houses. And then, similar thing, her vehicle was actually backed into an abandoned barn. So what is it with the vehicles? Like, why the vehicles? You almost wonder if it's a scenario where the perpetrator created these incidents to say, hey, there's something wrong with your car. Let me help you. Because oftentimes, like if you think about Ted Bundy and some of the more advanced serial killers, for instance, a lot of them had a ruse. He had a thing where he would have a sling and say, hey, I need help with my sailboat, or any number of things, or hey, can I help you? Like, there's something wrong with your car. Let me try to help you. Or I'm the police. Your car is illegal. Somebody's been trying to break into your car. I mean, think about all the ruses that could happen. And especially being a young girl, like in her early 20s, oftentimes you don't realize danger just because you haven't experienced it, because your family has kept you safe up until this point. But I think that's the thing that would make the most sense, that someone had a ruse on these girls and we're like, hey, let's go over here. I'll help you. I'll give you a ride. I'll take you somewhere safe. And then, because there's no footprints. Similar thing with Brianna, And so the other thing is, they say absolutely about Brianna Maitland that she would not have disappeared. She was working on her life. She was proud of where her life was. She had a job. She was productive. She was doing what she wanted to do. She was living her life the way she wanted to live her life. And then somewhere along the lines, things got derailed. And I think the thing that ultimately makes the most sense is that someone who seemed, because if you don't know people, you don't know who they actually are. So someone who seemed friendly and nice and everything said, hey, I'll just give you a ride, like no big deal. And then, just back your car into my barn. And then like, once everything's good, then we'll we'll go back and get your car. No big deal. I mean, yeah, I'm from around here. Everything's good. Everything's great. And then you get in the car with that person. And then that's when you find out that things are not as they seem to be. I think that makes the most sense, especially because if and we don't know the mindset of where Brianna was. We don't know that she was having any issues whatsoever. She seemed like a person who was, taking care of herself and her responsibilities. And ultimately, maybe she just trusted the wrong person, which is really sad to think about. I actually saw a short TikTok here recently about Ted Bundy. And there was this lady who had gotten into a car with him. And when she got into the car, she realized that it had no door handles. And she had said something along the lines of, he's like, well, I'm going to take you to the zoo. And so she was like, okay. So she gets in the car because, the bus was late or whatever. And so she gets in the car, and as he's driving, she realizes that he is not actually taking her to the zoo. He has bypassed the zoo and he's taking her to some unknown location that she's not comfortable with. But the one thing that really concerned her was the fact that he was an attractive guy who had talked to her in the beginning and had been really nice and really cordial and really just charismatic. And so she trusted him. And so she let her guard down and got in the car. When she realizes there's no door handle, there's a little bit of panic. And then when she realizes that he's not taking her to the zoo, she's like, oh my goodness, like, what am I going to do? And so at one point she says she looks at him and he stopped talking completely. He's just looking at her. But his pupils, apparently, like his eyes, like he had blue eyes like I do, and his eyes had turned like black. And so one of the experts, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Candace DeLong, she's a profiler, and she was talking about how he was literally having a disassociative moment at that time, and that he had literally was just, in that moment of like predatory behavior. And so, but the woman, the victim of that, was actually concerned that this handsome guy, she didn't want to offend him by saying, hey, you're not taking me to the zoo. Like, this isn't the right way to go. Because she thought that he was a good person still at that point. But she did mention his black eyes, which is extremely terrifying. And once you're in that situation, I mean, there's Candace DeLong actually in her clip actually talked about how, like, if you get in that scenario to, like, try to, get someone in the eyes or whatever, especially because he had started choking her at that point. So if you get in that situation to kind of try to get the eyes, because people are going to drop whatever they're doing to protect their eyes, because our eyes are the most vulnerable parts of our body. So I thought that was really interesting. So even when people intend to leave, they don't usually vanish without a trace. They're still going to have activity on their credit cards. They're still going to call family members, especially the fact that she was concerned about her sister. And like you go to Brianna Maitland. I mean, she literally was a person who was reliable, who was building a life for herself. And she clearly would have gone back to work, right? She wouldn't have missed her work. And so I don't know. I hope at some point, ultimately, my hope for all of these cases is that they're solved and that the family can get some sense of resolution. I mean, they're likely not going to get their family member back, unfortunately, but maybe they can get some sort of resolution and some sort of peace, knowing that their family member is where they, where they're safe and where they're at peace, because that can be extremely difficult and hard for sure. So in closing, the difference between leaving and disappearing is what happens next. And so ultimately, I think that if you were leaving, you're going to continue living your life. If you've disappeared, your life is going to stop where you left it or where someone interfered with your life. And so ultimately, I think that both girls are connected. I'm hoping that at some point there's someone that comes forward with information, because, it just takes one piece of information. One piece of information where someone saw something, someone saw someone being put in a car. I don't know if they cook, because it was dark then, or somebody hears a rumor that someone said. I mean, ultimately, the more people you involve in the conspiracy, the more people that you involve in the crime, the more people that are going to come forward and say, hey, this isn't right. This isn't right. So if you guys enjoy this format, feel free to like and subscribe. And I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much for your help, Prana. I appreciate you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.